The Autoblog Podcast is presented by the Salvation Army. Your donations help those in need win their daily battles to survive poverty. To give, ask your smart speaker to make a donation to the Salvation Army, or make your gift at salvationarmyusa.org.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Autoblog Podcast. I'm Greg Migliore. Joining me today in studio, Associate Editor Joel Stocksdale. What is up?
Hey, everybody.
And Assistant Editor and Fleet Manager, Zach Palmer.
How's it going, everyone? Happy to be here.
All right, we got a great show for you today. The Mercedes GLS 580 4MATIC. We're going to lead off with that. We also will talk about our time in the Porsche Panamera GTS. Very nice car. And the Hyundai Elantra N-Line. Kind of an interesting little quirky car. Kind of a lot of fun for that. A couple of news items we're going to hit on. The Chevy Colorado gets a refresh, facelift. First pictures of that. We'll break that down for you. And the BMW M8 Gran Coupe breaks cover. Lastly, we will spend your money. This is a fun one. You're going to want to stick around for that. But let's jump right in. The GLS 580. We had this in town as part of actually our Tech of the Year testing. More on that in the near future. We tested several things, and we did vote on a winner. We're not going to reveal that today, so stay tuned. But the thing we were testing on the GLS was its active E body control?
E-active
body control. There we go. And of course...
In all caps.
In all caps.
Yeah.
Joel, say how you would do it.
Oh, E-active body control.
Right. Adjust your phones and
Goes well with 4MATIC all-wheel drive.
Right.
So,
Mercedes has this habit of putting like everything in caps on their spec sheets.
All the time.
Every press release.
Exactly. So anyways, when we weren't doing Tech of the Year testing, we got to drive one of the nicest Mercedes SUVs of all time. This one came in at, you guys want to guess the price or do you already know?
I already know it, so that would be cheating.
I don't know, so I guess I can probably take a stab at it. So this is the GLS.
The S-Class of Mercedes SUVs.
It's got the big
It's got
engine.
the V8. I'm going to say 110,000.
Not actually that close. $125.
Okay.
Yeah, you're a bit low there.
Little low. I honestly, driving this thing, it feels like about a $90,000 SUV,
Yeah,
which
I think
is
I'd
not
agree.
even a backhanded compliment. It feels very nice. It's very rich. It's very decadent. But $125,000.
I think the interior isn't quite as nice as like the S-Class. Like I feel like the S-Class is a little bit fancier. I guess maybe it's because the GLS has the sort of like trucky looking version of the Mercedes interior, so it's got like the square vents and
They have the handles like in
Yeah.
the center console, which seems totally unnecessary for around 95% of its clientele will use it. But yeah, it's a rich SUV. Let's put it that way. And I like the, starting under the hood, the V8 bi-turbo, 483 horsepower, 516 pound-feet of torque, hooked up to the 9-speed automatic. So it's a nice powertrain, drives pretty well. It's a pretty big SUV, and I think it still feels pretty quick. And of course, for me, I loved all the luxury goodies. Like anytime I get in the Mercedes, I look and see, hey, does it have the, massages? That's nice, The, I like all the creature comforts, the perfumes, the lights. These are things you could get on lower level things. But when you really get into the S-Line, the S-Class, or of course the GLS, it all feels just really decadent, I think.
it still cracks me up, perfumes in fancy cars. Like Mercedes isn't the only one to do it. I think BMW offers it too. And just like, I guess rich people are too good for little tree air fresheners to hang off their mirrors.
I don't really like the perfumes. I still haven't found any scent that I actually like from the Mercedes. It's cool for like a minute, but then it just becomes super intense
I bet.
perfume smell.
Well, and I've never been that big of a fan of car air fresheners anyway. I just want my car to be kind of neutral smelling.
Same. Yeah, but I don't really have much else to complain about with the GLS. Like you mentioned off the top, Greg, that e-active body control, It is awesome in practice. I was playing with curve mode. The way that thing leans into corners for being such a huge SUV is a bit mind-boggling, and it's actually somewhat unnatural. You have to like tune yourself to it. You go into a corner and all of a sudden you're leaning into it instead of leaning out, and then when you come back, feels like it's a massive boat and it's righting the bow. It's really strange with that huge hood, but no, I think it really works well when you have it in comfort mode and you're just rolling over the bumps. Feels like there's hardly anything there because the camera's out there watching and preparing the shocks, and it makes for a super comfortable GLS ride. I mean, I actually haven't driven an S-Class, so I can't compare it to the ride of an S-Class, but I imagine with that suspension, it's super close.
So that kind of brings me to my next question, the sort of thought line here. Would you guys consider this the S-Class of the Mercedes lineup, if you will? Kind of goes to you, Joel.
Like for their crossovers, or do you mean like even above the actual S-Class?
No, just for their crossovers.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if I were going to buy one, I might lean toward the GLE, because it offers a lot of the same thing, but it's like, there's no... Well, okay, this is obviously very much specific to me as a single guy with just a dog. Like, I don't need a gigantic SUV like that with an extra, like, 2 rows of seats with lots of luggage space and stuff. Like, I just don't need that. Like, actually, oh boy, I hesitate to even bring this up, but maybe Mercedes should do, like, a 2-door SUV thing based on it and call it, like, the GLS Coupe.
That's a really good idea. I bet they'd sell a ton of them.
They probably
when you
would.
think about it.
And probably loads of car journalists who could complain on Twitter about it.
That's probably true as well. I do think the size of it actually worked out pretty well. Just kind of it being a different end of the spectrum here. With a young kid at home, I was able to put his car seat in there and still have plenty of room. I was in some other vehicles that just, you put the car seat in and you really get pushed up forward. And it's a phenomena that 2 years ago, I didn't know this was a thing. When you have a kid in a car seat, you're like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. It's like you're steering with your knees. You're like up against the dashboard. Like if you hit a bump, you're afraid the airbag's going to go off and decapitate you. But in the GLS, you have plenty of room in that second row. There's a lot of room. And he really liked the skylight, because it's important your toddler has a skylight, of all the time. He doesn't even know that he's like, it's like, kid, you're in a GLS, but he's 20 months. So it's okay. And that's okay. But yeah, nice interior, a lot of room back there. Yeah, I mean, this is a good move for them. I think they had to add this thing, this is the first time I've been in a GLS. So I had a lot of sort of preconceived notions. I was trying to figure out how is this going to fit into with all these other things I'm accustomed, Mercedes to being. And I think it lived up. It's definitely expensive. I mean, once you recalibrate your brain to this being the S-Class of SUVs, I think it makes sense. But yeah, man, it's expensive.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. And, to your question, is it the S-Class of SUVs? I think it absolutely is. I think it's the S-Class for somebody that needs to move more than 4 people in total comfort. When you have that much space, you're going to do like a massive cross-country road trip. I mean, you're looking at this, or you're looking at, something much more expensive like a Bentley Bentayga, or, something like a big, like a long wheelbase Range Rover. And I think that Mercedes just absolutely kills it with the luxury, the way that the interior looks. I was driving it for like a half hour, and this thing just popped up on the screen. It's like, would you like to start revitalization mode? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not?
Absolutely.
Let's start this. It starts blowing the air in a different way. It starts the massaging seat up and starts some classical music here. It's like, all right, yeah, this is a very luxurious treatment right now that you don't get in pretty much every other manufacturer out there.
It's interesting. You bring up a great point, Zach, sort of the the competitors here. Because at first you think, well, an X7, but X7s don't really start at this price point, if I'm remembering all of the, the pricing right here. But, I mean, you get into territory where you're talking about really high-end Rovers, really expensive, like Bentleys, things like that. I don't know. I mean, it seems like Mercedes is doing something a little bit different here by truly trying to make, to keep going back to that cliche, that S-Class SUV. Whereas, I mean, sure, you could load up a Navigator, you could load up an Escalade, but at that point, you're sort of adding stuff on to get to this, like, price point. So, let's see, Joel, you got a price point for me?
Yeah, I'm looking that up right now, but that also reminds me. So I guess in this, because there's actually not that many, like, super luxury giant SUVs out there. Like the big ones are the GLS, the BMW X7, the Audi Q8.
The Q8, right.
The Q8 is like a small two-rower, though.
It's two-row, but it's about the same size as these guys. Like it's a big two-row, like really big. It is kind of like their flagship right now. And then you've got like Range Rover. And I mean, I guess you could say Escalade and Navigator, but like, not to say that they're bad, but they're just not quite at this level.
The Navigator, I feel like I could truly tell somebody to cross-shop that with a GLS now.
Because I guess you could get a black label for kind of a comparable,
you could get a black label
price.
Yeah, and it's definitely impressive, and I think it might actually look better than a GLS on the road. But if you're one of those people that want a German luxury car, this and the X7 are like right at the top for me. I think like an X7, they're coming out with an M50i trim version with the higher power V8. That could be nearing the price of the GLS, but Mercedes is traditionally just a bit more expensive than BMW.
And I should correct what I said. When you're looking at like base apples to apples, the GLS and X7 are fairly similar in like the low to mid 70s, but for me, seeing this like AMG, that's I guess what I meant, is like BMW isn't quite there yet with, a true competitor to this one. So, yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think personally I would be split between the Q8 or maybe a Range Rover. Because I really dig the way the Q8 looks. I think it looks kind of sportier, more interesting than like the X7 and the GLS. I feel look a little minivan-like. And I feel that way about a lot of three-row crossovers. It's kind of hard to avoid when it's a big box.
I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but I think I do like the GLS more than everything but the Rover. But go on.
Well, and then with the Range Rover, I really like Range Rovers, and I feel like it's a nice kind of middle ground between the very car-like GLS and the very truck-like G-Wagon. Like, it's got a lot more kind of road refinement, I think, than a G-Wagon, but it still has that, like, boxy feel and, like, great outward visibility. And I really like the plug-in hybrid Range Rover.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
And especially when, like, you're driving something that is not meant to go, like, fast and be sporty. It's like, I don't need to be burning a crazy amount of gas. Like, give me, like, 30 miles of in-town range.
It's interesting to watch as Mercedes and BMW sort of expand their crossover SUV range, and that's where you do get, to Joel's point, this almost like minivan type of Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
That was, I think, a key sticking point for me when I was getting into this. I thought, well, what is this going to be like? And I found myself really enjoying it. I mean, granted, it's definitely because it's in the AMG setup, but I thought it really sort of pulled off that Mercedes sporty feel in this form, which is in this case a three-row crossover. So I like that. The Range Rover, those really have identity. They really have character. It would be tough to say which one am I going to really enjoy more and feel excited about driving. It would probably be that. But this is really nice. Did you guys make a dance? That's the question.
Oh, yeah. We made it dance a lot. Probably like too much for, for like three mature adults in a car, But hey, you got to. It's the only car that does this.
Yeah.
So.
And just for like our listeners to explain, the e-active body control, it's got these off-road functions where one of them is called a free ride, and it is there to help get you out of deep sand or deep snow. And it starts bouncing the car up and down, like raising and lowering the suspension quickly. And the idea is that as it's kind of like bouncing upward, sand falls underneath the tires and kind of lifts you out. And I mean, we tried that for technical testing on dry pavement. And, I mean, it looks a little bit like a lowrider. It kind of bouncing up and down.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
I took this home last night. I regret not having my son get a ride in that thing. Well, it might be a bit too much. It's more than just a normal bounce house.
Yeah, and like in addition to that, you can in off-road mode, you can individually raise and lower each corner of the car. Basically, so you've got all this axle articulation. If you're like stuck up on rocks and you've got wheels in the air, you can kind of drop those down and get traction again on those formerly air suspended wheels.
Well, one note: if you're somewhat queasy in the stomach, we had some people were like, "Yeah, actually, getting a little sick back here after doing the bounce mode for like 30 seconds to a minute." It becomes a bit much.
Well, and obviously you're not supposed to use
You're not
it
supposed to,
except
no.
when you're stuck in deep sand.
We had to test it.
Yeah.
Yep.
My favorite was our managing editor, Greg Race, brought a cup of coffee with him. He's like, "Oh, check this out." And he's like, "Hey, guys, I have coffee back here." I thought he was joking. Then I looked back and I'm like, "Oh, geez, he's got a foam paper cup of coffee." We were to cut this out for a second. But no harm, no foul, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right, so that's the Mercedes GLS 580. I found that to be a really interesting car. Anytime you could drive a vehicle like that for the first time, really just sort of explore this new addition to a product line, especially for a company like Mercedes, I always find that really interesting. So moving along, 2019 Porsche Panamera GTS Sport Turismo. Very nice vehicle as well. This one actually was more than the GLS, came in at $144,520. Wow. Had the twin turbocharged V8, 453 horsepower, and a lot of other stuff that the GTS Sport Turismo has. This thing was loaded in simple terms. 21-inch turbo, 911 turbo design wheels, which was $2,100, and $5,000 for the PDCC Torque Vectoring Plus, which is the torque vectoring system.
Well, the thing is, this is not the fastest Panamera, nor the most expensive. They
Yep.
get faster and more expensive from
Indeed.
here.
I enjoyed it. Of course I enjoyed it. The
How could you
car's,
not?
this much money. I liked, the motor's pretty nice. That's, it's smooth, it's quick. The car steered really well too, I think, for essentially like a station wagon. I like the handling. I like Porsche's, their infotainment system, I think, has definitely grown on me. You got inside this thing, it was almost like being in a sports bar with these like screens lit up like in your face. It wasn't too deep to use. I feel like I've used worse Porsche systems. So I liked it in general. I think it's definitely a very narrow customer base, probably one that maybe they'll sort of tread water for this like sort of wagon crossover thing, for a while. I do think eventually, just sedans in general, whether it's whatever, super sporty or just, the Ford Fusion, we're to see less and less of them. So there's that. But ton of room in the back too. I mean, it's, the proverbial, retriever hauler. You can put your dog, you can put all kinds of camping stuff, coolers back there. It's pretty nice. I mean, I don't have a lot of criticism for it other than this isn't the car for me.
Yeah. I mean, if I were to have, I think, one Porsche, if I was stuck with one that had to be a daily driver, a sports car, everything, I think this would be the one. I am super in love with the Sport Turismo shape. I always love a wagon, just as pretty much any other automotive journalist will tell you. We all love wagons, and this is a really good looking one. And it's in the GTS trim, so that means you get a lot of the extra handling stuff as standard. The suspension, it's workable, but I would not call it a soft, easy ride. But that's one of the compromises you make to get the great handling that you were talking about, Greg. The steering is fantastic. Thing changes direction way faster than I would think a big wagon of that size would. And the crazy thing to me is that, that you get way more power than what this thing already has. I believe the turbo has in like the mid 500s in horsepower range, and this is only sitting in the mid 400s. And it feels really fast. Feels very, very fast. I only got the chance to drive it in the rain. It's raining for 24 or 48 hours straight here in Michigan. But the all-wheel drive system hooked right up, and it honestly didn't feel much slower than the 3.9 0 to 60 time that Porsche quotes.
Yeah, I think what really I only had like a short period of time in it, but the time that I did have in it was interesting because it was at the end of the week where we had the AMG GT 63S four-door. Has a lot of letters and numbers.
Yeah.
And even though the Mercedes had over 600 horsepower compared with the Porsche's like mid 400 or 453 horsepower,
453, yeah.
the Porsche didn't really feel any slower. Like it felt like it was as quick as the AMG, which shocked me. Like because that's nearly a 200 horsepower difference. That's significant.
Yep.
And the Porsche still felt like it was almost as fast. I thought it had way more power than 453.
Did you use the sport response mode when you?
Actually, I didn't press that.
You didn't.
I did
it feels faster.
I put it in like the highest like sport mode.
Yeah, sport.
But
plus.
I never hit the sport response button.
Yeah, no. Sport plus is pretty intense, but the sport response, it felt like it had even more right off the line.
Yeah, that's wild. It was also interesting having these two like big expensive four-door sedans. I guess technically hatchbacks because the AMG was a hatchback also. Yeah. And I don't know which one I would take home. The Porsche, I think, is more civilized all around. Like it rode much smoother than the GT63S. Just seemed a little bit quieter. It felt like the power came on a little smoother. But there is like I honestly didn't like the AMG GT at first. Because it just seemed way too powerful, way too fast for the road. Like you couldn't take any advantage of it. And it like felt really like it had a really stiff ride. I was like, who is this for? This giant sedan that is stupid fast and rides rough. But over time, like the AMG grew on me. I think it has better feedback through the steering. It's got shocking grip. Like that thing just sticks and sticks and sticks. And I think the AMG sounds better too. So I don't know which I would take home. I think the AMG actually looks cooler too. The Porsche I feel is a little anonymous. Like
I actually don't really like the way the AMG GT four-door looks.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of that look, which is a little surprising because I've always liked the way the CLS looks, which is a similar like four-door swoopy coupe styled car, but that the AMG GT four-door doesn't really do it for me. I really prefer the way the Porsche looks, the classic wagon, slicked back. It's just way better looking than a regular Panamera to me. Like the regular Panamera has always just looked a little frumpy. It got better with this latest generation, but I'm still going to take a Sport Turismo every time.
I will admit, I didn't used to be a fan of the AMG GT four-door styling. I thought it looked a little flabby. But I think part of that was the colors it was in. Because this one that we got that was in bright gloss red, I think really made it work. And with like the big wing on the back, it had a little extra presence to it. It looked a little bit more exciting. Because most of the time I just saw it in like black and silver, and it just kind of looked like a normal Mercedes, but a little bit overweight. But like the bright color, I think really made it pop.
Yeah,
I think I would. So I would agree kind of with like what you just said there, Zach. I really like the Panamera as a wagon. Like to me, that's the car right there. That's like what the Panera bread. I have lunch on the mind.
Panamera bread.
Yeah, Panamera bread. That sounds tasty. That's what the Panamera should be, I really think. I don't think as a sedan it does much for me. Obviously, I'm putting on my auto journalist hat here, but I do like the AMG a little bit more. I just think I drove the back-to-back last week. If this is the rainy week, I think I'm thinking it was. And I really like the AMG. It really felt special in a way that, this car is $144,000. It feels special. But the AMG GT just had this I think I like new things is what I'm finding. This just felt new to me. I was like, this is this new special thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm like, yeah, there we go. So that's kind of where I layered down on it.
And actually, one other thing on it, the AMG GT, it's got more room. The back seats, I was more comfortable in the back seats of the AMG than the Porsche. And I think the AMG's got a bigger cargo space.
That's interesting. I would agree with that anecdotally, sticking a car seat in there. I'll just go back to my major testing point. It seems like with any vehicle these days, the car seats did fit a little bit better in the Mercedes. So, yeah. But I mean, I will say this. When the Panamera first came out, and I remember driving it because it was like such a big deal. It was like, wow, this is Porsche's sedan. And now that it's just this, it comes in this wagon variant, I think that's super cool. And I think that really is where they should be. And it's so much more enjoyable to me. It really gives the car this like sense of poise. I feel like it has the right balance and the right dynamics. And again, that steering, man, that steering in that car is just spot on. It is so dialed in.
Yeah, like almost everything about the driving experience is the PDK, lightning quick shifts when you want it. This was, I think, the first Porsche PDK other than one in a Macan that I had driven, and it blew my mind. Like, just basically telepathic with the car. Like, it knew I wanted to hit the gas here. It already had selected the gear for me. Just everything was perfect. It made me want to use the pedals, and most cars don't make me want to use the pedals in an actual manual mode with an automatic.
Yeah, and while I think I prefer the AMG GT63S over the Panamera GTS, could be totally different based on like other trim levels because because that Mercedes is the top version of that. There's also a 6-cylinder one and a less powerful V8 one, and with the Panamera, there's a lower end V6 version of that and a higher end V8 and even a hybrid version of the Panamera.
Yeah,
and the hybrid one might
cool,
even be what I would want if I had like almost $200,000 because that's how much the hybrid turbo of Sport Turismo whatever costs.
And then the Taycan starts to come into the discussion as well.
I
If
know,
you're looking
the
at that
Taycan-
much
and
money
actually,
in that size.
You can have like the Taycan you can actually get for less than some of the top end Panamera models.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that's the play, is go with the Taycan.
Yeah.
But I think what we've also discovered in this podcast is I like new and shiny things, and we all like AMGs. So that, I guess that's no, brilliant breakthrough there. But yeah, so let's move along. You guys spent some time in the 2019 Hyundai Elantra GT. This is the N line with the manual transmission, which is kind of neat. A little bit of kind of a hot hatch, correct?
Yeah, or maybe like a warm hatch.
A
might
warm
be,
hatch, a
kind of
medium
slightly
spicy.
accurate.
Slightly spicy, I think.
Yeah.
Would be a good way to describe it. It has the 6-speed manual, 201 horsepower out of that 1.6 liter 4-cylinder. I don't think it's quite up to the level of the fun of a Civic Si, but I think it's really, really close. And it's slightly cheaper than that Civic as well. Now, this thing handles so well. It feels light. It's responsive. They put Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tires on it, so those are summer rubber. There's a ridiculous amount of grip, more than you would ever expect from a little Hyundai hatchback. The transmission has good action. Every now and then there's a shift, and it's like, it doesn't feel as good as a Honda shifter, but it's close.
Mm-hmm.
And then, on top of that, I think the N-line treatment looks really nice. It has really nice wheels. They put a different grille on it. It has a dual exhaust. I think it's all a little bit better than what the Elantra GT Sport looked like, which was this car's sort of predecessor. That car was on sale for a couple 2-3 years, I believe, and they've just kind of transitioned it to the N-line and made a few changes. I actually drove that car, the Sport, on its launch a while ago, and this feels like they went a little more hardcore with it. The suspension is a little stiffer. The engine note is a little meaner from that dual exhaust that it has. Just a little bit more, because I think one of the main complaints that people were lodging against Hyundai back when they came out with that slightly warm hatch was that it wasn't enough. And I think that this brings it closer to a little bit more into, I don't know, the eyes of an enthusiast if you're looking for a fun daily driver.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what you got from it, Joel. I'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah, I actually really liked it. And part of that was just because I was excited to have anything that was kind of small, sporty with a manual transmission in the midst of a couple of weeks of lots of just crossovers. And yeah, I was impressed with it. One of the things that I love about this, and also the Hyundai Veloster Turbo, I love the turbo 1.6 liter engine. I think it's one of my favorite small turbo engines. And a big part of that is that the power comes on really smoothly and it comes on pretty low. So like you get a really nice wide meaty torque band, like right in the middle of the rev range. So it feels like it's got a lot of power. You can still tell it's a turbo. Like there's a little bit of that kind of turbo hit, like when it's all spooled up. But it does feel like it comes on very smoothly and pretty quickly. I think more so than even like Honda's turbo 1.5 liter engines. I like the way it looks. It's handsome. I personally prefer the Veloster because the Veloster's got a little bit more personality to it. But I totally get why someone might want something a little bit more conservative looking, just like traditionally handsome. Like it's got clean lines, got just a little bit of sportiness from the front fascia, and more space than a Veloster because it's a little bigger.
So tell me, what would you take this over and what would you take over this? Like, where would you rank this in this sort of like segment?
Pretty high. I would definitely take this over a Honda Civic Sport hatchback.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a few reasons for that, and it's actually not even necessarily regarding the way it drives. I mean, it drives great, really responsive steering, like really tight chassis. It's definitely stiffer than I expected. I think that's because of the inline suspension.
Yep. It
and
is.
Actually, to that extent, if you're sensitive to a firm ride, I might skip it, but I'm fine with it. I think the interior is much more usable than the Honda Civic. And part of that is the infotainment. Like the Honda Civic infotainment is atrocious. It's slow, it's unresponsive, it's ugly, it's bad. But the Hyundai, like, it's really easy to use. It's got lots of nice shortcut buttons that are easy to see and read and press. Like you can get to a really comfortable driving position. There's lots of steering wheel adjustment, lots of seating adjustment. And the seat actually has a fair bit of support. Like it's got decent bolsters and it's got some lumbar to it. I think like as an all-around package, I like it better than the Civic Hatch Sport. I don't know if I would get it over a Civic Si, like you said.
I think, the one thing that would make me want it more than an SI is the fact that you can get it in a hatchback.
Mm-hmm.
With the SI, you're stuck with a sedan or a coupe. Which personally I'd be fine with because I think the advantages of an SI outweigh any of the pluses from the Hyundai. Even though they did make it a little more hardcore, I think the fact that the SI it has an electronically adjustable suspension, it has a limited slip diff, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for 2020 they actually added the full Honda sensing tech in there, so you have adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist, forward collision. The Hyundai has none of that. None of the Hyundai Kia products that have a manual transmission they haven't figured out how to get adaptive cruise control into any of those cars yet. I was hoping to see it in this one, but not quite there yet. And actually, on the interior, I think I like the Honda's interior a little bit better. I like they have like a pretty cool like tech forward gauge cluster. The only thing that is better on the Hyundai to me is that infotainment system because Honda is just it's a good step behind. But the actual utility and usability, I like all the big cubbies in the Civic. There's just a whole lot of space to put stuff that I think is just a little bit better than the Hyundai. And the trim on the Hyundai, I think, felt a little low rent compared to the SI as well. They just had black plastic panels everywhere. There wasn't, there was a little bit of red around the vents, but there were only two of those. Besides that, it's just a pretty boring to look at interior.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think the Civic does have a nicer looking interior. And so that's one of the things that you got to weigh against. I think the Civic has maybe a nicer looking interior and feeling interior. I think the Hyundai is maybe a little more usable interior.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like pick your poison there. But yeah, so I think we're in agreement that we'd probably still take the SI over it, but probably ahead of Civic Hatch, maybe.
Yeah, definitely ahead of Civic Hatch.
I think for me it would be a tough call between this and a Mazda 3 Hatch, because the Mazda has a way way nicer interior than anything else in the segment.
Yeah, and the other thing, the Mazda 3 Hatch you can't get for any less than about $28,000, and
with a manual.
Yeah, with a manual. True. I was just comparing the N-line manual to that one.
Right.
And this one, I believe the N-line manual is about 25.2 or 24.8, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
So it's way cheaper than the Mazda. But to your point, the Mazda is awesome, and it's, I might say it's just about as fun as this one.
Yeah, the Mazda's handling is just spectacular. It's so good. The
Yep.
steering is so sharp and so communicative.
Yeah.
The chassis is so eager. It's a really good car. It's a favorite around here.
Yeah. If this Elantra GT N-Line had a limited slip diff, I might be changing my tune a little because I took it out to some really good back roads over the weekend that I was driving it, and every single time I'd get on the gas in a corner, I'd just spin that front wheel up, and I'm just, oh man,
It's a frustrating feeling.
it's so frustrating. If they would add that, something that the Civic Si has, and it makes the car a lot better for it. I don't know. My whole tune might change on whether I would buy this car over some others.
Great discussion, guys. You make me wish I had actually driven it. So, I guess this is the week of SUVs and Panameras and AMG GTs. I think it's really interesting that you guys are so willing to put this car right in the discussion with, Hondas and Mazdas, vehicles that we've historically really liked. And, you guys have it right in there. My initial impetus would be to kind of just put this below those. But I think it's you make a lot of great, measured empirical points using, your impressions and real data, why this thing belongs with a seat at the table. So that's great. All right. So let's move along to the news segment. This week, a couple of stories. The Chevy Colorado facelift is out. Really, the big story here is not so much what we've seen, but what else they're going to do. They haven't revealed mechanicals, if they're going to even do mechanical changes, or really much else. They basically showed us a picture of the sort of the off-road desert trim, the ZR2, which looks a bit different if you look at it. So really, the press photos are wonderful. If you head over to our site, we have a nice piece there, went up the other day. But I think the big news here, really, to put it into context, is that essentially, with all of the increased competition in this segment, Chevy's got to do something, even if it's sort of symbolic. Just shuffle the deck a little bit, make this truck look a little bit different. Originally, when the Colorado launched, it basically reinvigorated this segment. This and the GMC Canyon, got a lot of attention to it. I remember interviewing different, competing truck makers at the time, and they said, honestly, we're kind of happy GM's in this because GM knows how to spend a lot of money. They're getting a lot of attention to this segment. So, that's what these two trucks did. Now they're getting long in the tooth, so we'll see. I think this is really this is not a full-scale redesign, anything major, but they're doing something to try to get the conversation about the Colorado. So what do you guys think of this?
So I am most excited about something we haven't seen yet, to see if they're going to redesign the interior, because that to me was like the biggest low point about this truck. It rides great. I thought the powertrains have been great. The fact that you can get the naturally aspirated V6 and a diesel engine, I thought those are both great. I don't know if they need to do much there, but the interior felt cheap. It just needs something to put it ahead of other trucks out there, because honestly, none of the trucks in this class are like beautiful interiors. But I think that Chevy has an opportunity to do something here with it. And then the one, the few pictures that we see of this ZR2, I'm seeing, the same thing that Chevy's been doing with trucks for a while now. Ever since the new Silverado they're slapping the huge grill on there. And one thing that actually threw me for a loop was seeing the Chevy bow tie off to the side.
Yeah, that was, if you take nothing else away from this article, that's kind of the big change that's evident anyways.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen on any Chevy vehicle the bow tie off to the side like that. It's always smack dab in the middle. But on the next, the mid-cycle ZR2, it's sitting off there to the driver's side, right under the massive Chevrolet in block letters on the grill. And like I mentioned before, it's a big grill, so hopefully you like making an entrance wherever you're going.
My sense for this may only be on the ZR2, or this could even
Yeah.
be an option grill or something like that for down the road. Truthfully, what they did with that Camaro grill, and I think I was like the only person who liked it on the SS, if I'm remembering
Yeah,
right.
the 1 year SS
And then they had to
grill.
rush in the refresh. It was like not even a year. It was like 9 months. And
Yeah.
boom, they're like, yeah, no, this is what we're really doing.
Just kidding.
So I don't know. I would say their batting average isn't great with some of these weird grills, but I think it looks okay. But I bet you the regular trims have a more conventional grill.
Certainly.
Yeah, so
At least I hope so. Let's put it
so
that
this
way.
this grill is very much like the misstep of the SS grill. Like it's got that same weird like big huge center section that then like extends into like these wings kind of underneath the headlights. And I think it's not as bad on this, partly because a lot of it still kind of looks like the existing one, but the thing is, all this extra extension, it doesn't match the existing design. It looks slapped on and it looks weird and like
I think it
Ugh.
kind of looks cheap, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think somehow Chevy designers have got it in their heads that like doing these sort of like blackout grills are like the way everybody's going, and they're like the only ones doing it. It seems like, at least in this, execution, and it literally looks like the truck's kind of like missing something almost.
yes.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's how I described the old Camaro SS. It looked like somebody like it looked like it'd been in an accident and just had this giant hole in the front. And I mean, you can do big grills. It's possible to make it work, but like if you're gonna do it, you've got to commit and do like a thorough refresh. And this is just a partial one. Like you can tell that the headlights and fenders and stuff are still basically from the current one, but then they did this crazy nose job, and it's like,
Yeah, the headlights are still halogen lights. So, I mean, it looks like they haven't transitioned to LED there. At least I would expect LED on the full-on the ZR2. But, I mean, I see that you guys don't really like it that much. I don't hate it as much as the big black Camaro grill. I thought that grill looked like it should be on a truck. And, hey, now it kind of is on a truck. And I'm just sort of down the middle. If I had to go one way, I'd probably say, more thumbs down than thumbs up. But I'm not in the, throw it away camp. Just, keep it, see what it is. I want to see the rest of the grills to see, if they, come around to something more reasonable.
Have you guys read the comments on this story?
no,
I have not,
yet.
no.
Yeah,
But
that's a fun
I
thing
see there
to
are
just
a lot.
do.
Like
It
I'm
got
also,
a lot of traffic, and it got a lot of discourse. Let's put it that way.
like I'm also worried about what grills we're gonna see next, because presumably they want to fill all that space, and I'm guessing that they're gonna want to use chrome. And I think this might look worse if it's bright and shiny in chrome.
Well, no,
'Cause
that'll be the
just
GMC
bring-
Canyon is all chrome, probably,
Wow.
right? The Denali.
Well, the thing is, GMC has been kind of conservative on
Yeah,
their style
I'd
lately.
agree.
Like, if you look at the Sierra versus the Silverado, the Sierra is
Yeah.
much more conventionally handsome. Like, it's not like the Silverado went aggressive and bold with its grille, and the Sierra is more evolutionary. But yeah, I'm just afraid that like the base ones are gonna have like a crazy shiny plastic front that is gonna just draw even more attention to it. And I mean, on the ZR2, you can get away with a little bit of craziness because the whole thing looks butch and tough and scary. But on the regular ones, I'm not entirely sure it's gonna work.
If
Yeah.
you actually look at the 2019 ZR2 model, it does have somewhat of the same ethos with that like kind of gaping grill, but it looks like obviously the bow tie kind of pulls it all together, and there is that bisecting bar. So it's not just so much just this like gaping hole on the front of the truck. There's some interesting traits there. I mean, maybe we're getting too stylistic here as we dissect this, and we haven't even seen the other trims, but I mean, to go back to the Zach's original point, the interior was really the part of this truck that needed an upgrade. We tested this spring at our midsize truck comparison, and this was a competitive third. And something all the testers said was, "Yeah, I like this thing. This is pretty good. It's capable. It does everything pretty well. If it had a slightly better interior, it might have leapt ahead of some of the other competitors. There's no great interior in that segment. I would argue the Ranger's interior is not better. The Ranger won that test because, frankly, it metrically does some really good things in the statistics department. And then the Gladiator, probably was actually our favorite truck, but it was so expensive that it got kind of weighed down, and it was a very close test. I mean, the Colorado was right in there too. So
yeah, in my experience, I think the Colorado may be my favorite truck in the segment, mainly because it drives extremely well.
yeah, it's a great suspension.
Like it handles well, it rides well. It feels very civilized, but it's also very capable.
I would not disagree with that. I think, let me put it this way. If you said, Greg, on any given day, is the Colorado your favorite? I would probably say no, but on some days it might be. Like, I really like this truck, and I think GM had some courage to go back into this segment when I remember interviewing a Ram executive, and he was like beyond condescending. He's like, I don't know what kind of lifestyle truck this is. We're not going to do that. Then, well, maybe you guys should have got into the game a little quicker for that. So I think it took a lot of guts to do this. They were the first. They were bringing this out as Ford was, finally getting rid of the Ranger. The Taco just was rotting out there. Nobody thought the Jeep Gladiator would be a thing. So they were out there when others weren't. But yeah, man, I don't know. The grill is what it comes down to for this stuff anyway. I think I'll feel better when I know more. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. I will say one nice thing, though. And actually, I don't mind having the bow tie off to the side. I think it looks kind of neat that way. And I like the block lettering in the grill. But I also like the tailgate with the embossed Chevy logo in the back.
Yeah, I love that on the Ranger too.
Yeah. I like that on trucks. Like that used to be on like every truck. They all had the big block letters stamped in the tailgate. It's like I dig that, and I'm glad that that's back.
Actually, I totally agree with you on that. They seems like the front end they kind of failed art class, but the back end, yeah, that does look pretty good.
And it's a really simple thing. I mean, you could probably get a regular Colorado now and pick up one of these tailgates off of a wrecked one later if you'd like it enough.
I bet you could, yeah. I like you get the black emblems instead of chrome as well.
Yeah.
It does match the front and the huge gaping black maw and all the other black trim. Just works together real nicely.
It's yeah, I don't know. I really like the Chevy Colorado ZR2. So that's kind of why, in some ways, I frankly picked it for the podcast. It was like, I just feel like talking about it for 10 minutes here. And yeah, I don't know. It feels like they, like Joel said, they didn't quite go far enough. And then sort of by kind of hesitating, they came up with this, well, we did something, but it's probably not enough or not what we want it to be. So we'll see. So let's just totally go there's no way to transition this to the BMW M8 Gran Coupe.
We're going from something arguably ugly to something arguably gorgeous.
So Joel, you wrote the story. This came off embargo Tuesday night. Why don't you just take us through the basics, first of all?
Yeah, so the BMW M8 Gran Coupe, it's the inevitable M version of the regular Gran Coupe that was revealed a few months ago. And just like the Coupe, it's got a twin turbocharged 4.4-liter V8, and in base trim it makes 600 horsepower and 553 pound-feet of torque, and the competition version makes 617 horsepower and the same amount of torque. But you get all that torque more of the time because peak torque is available for an extra 260 RPM later than the regular version. And I think it looks great.
Especially in these press photos, the purple.
Yes, that purple is sweet.
That would be the color I would get it in.
Twitter lost its mind last night over that color.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And honestly, the Gran Coupe is the 8 Series version that I would get too. I know we had a M850i Coupe in the office a while back. Loved that car, but the back seats are close to useless. And with this, you get the same form factor, same pretty much everything, except you have a usable back seat. And it still looks gorgeous.
I would almost argue that this looks better than the regular 8 Series Coupe. And I think part of that, for me, is that it's got that classic long nose, short rear deck, cab rearward look to it. It's a surprisingly elegant car.
I would jump in and say that I actually like the 8 Series Coupe better, but I think I would prefer driving the sedan. I just feel like when you're getting to a car this big, just having the proportions of a sedan, I think is better for the driver, or for a driver with my sort of strategy for driving big cars like this. They're powerful. I like to sort of know where all my corners are. You get in the coupe and it's like, obviously the roof lines are very dramatic regardless of how many doors, but I just feel like when you get in a big car like this, like, I don't know, the 7 Series, it feels more natural to me. Let me put it that way. This is exciting. I think this is a pretty thoughtful extension of the 8 Series range. We all knew this was coming, but I think it's what they should do, and I think it's better than doing, I would say, a full-on sedan, although you're really getting into semantics when you say what is and isn't a sedan. I mean, this is a sedan for all intents and purposes, but they can sort of cage it and claim it's a Gran Coupe, sort of. I like it. I think the stats look good. I think, they're going to make it a bit of a halo car for themselves and for the 8 Series range. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, this is it. I think it's a much better looking M5. Honestly, it's it's a 4-door.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It has a trunk. It's more expensive. Has the same powertrains. The same. You can make it rear wheel drive only. If I were had over $100,000 to spend on a super fast BMW, I think I'd definitely go for this over an M5. It's just as fast, 3.0 to 60. The one thing that I was slightly disappointed at, it does not have the crystal shifter. It has a leather-covered
Well, that's just a deal breaker.
gear lever. It's a bit of a deal breaker, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say literally, if the car does not have the crystal shifter, forget about it. You got to go to one of the Volvos. They all have Aurifers crystals in there, so you're fine. I mean,
But hey, it may not have the crystal shifter, but as a bonus, the M8 is actually cheaper than the regular M8. Like the M8 Gran Coupe is actually cheaper than the M8 Coupe.
Which is surprising. You add doors and then
Yes,
drop the price.
there's more car here, but it's cheaper.
seems like a good value, one you don't normally get for BMW. So I will say this. Doesn't it seem like BMW's like naming system is just destroyed? Like for a while it was going to be like even numbers were the coupes. Now even numbers
This
are...
is a coupe. It's the Gran Coupe.
Right. I know I just sort of said that. But it's like, seriously, like it was like, okay, so odds are going to be the 3 Series, the 5 Series. Here's your sedans. Okay, we're going to fill them in with these coupes. Oh, well, wait a minute. Then we're going to start throwing in like these, Gran Coupes and all these other things. And I know they've been doing this for a decade at least. But man, I mean, I feel like they've muddied the waters so much on what their names and numbers mean that...
I mean, that doesn't
maybe
bother
nobody
me.
cares.
Like, I mean, I get mildly annoyed, but not as much as I do when it comes to their trim designations. Because it used to be that, like, the numbers, like, after the model name indicated, like, displacement, like a 28.
Yeah, I like that.
Like, a 28 was a 2.8 liter engine. But now they've, like, changed, like, 30, 40, and 50s, and they basically just mean, like, base engine, mid-engine, top engine. Like they have no basis on what it is actually powering the car. And especially on like the SUVs and stuff, that's like S Drive 30i or X Drive. Like
it almost seems like
annoying
they're
that-
confessing the statistics to you. Like I know if I want all-wheel drive or what kind of engine I want. And it's like they feel like they need to get every little bit of info in the name.
And they don't.
Yeah.
They
don't.
really
Yeah.
don't.
Heaven forbid it's a hybrid model, because then you have an iDrive E in there as well.
Oh, it's such a mess.
Yeah,
Such a
they
mess.
just get longer and longer.
Really looks great on your registration, your insurance forms. Anyways, how about we spend some money? Shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. This comes from the Reddit Our Cars thread, which is always good. We like to dive in there. But hey, please send us your spend my monies. Reach out to us on Twitter. Send them to us. We want to spend your money too. So this one is fairly simple. Budget is $16,000. This person is 28 and single. Here's the weird bit. Has a bad back apparently at 28. That's tough. Wanted to buy a Civic, but no dice. Most Toyotas don't work. Tried a Prius. Sort of can manage that, but apparently that's not comfortable enough. Needs to have power seats, which would help with the back. Kind of decided on a 2017 Mazda 3. Okay. They're a little thin on the ground in blue. Okay. Second guessing themselves for going over budget, maybe 18 instead of 16, which is what they're looking for. Negotiated the Mazda 3 hatch to $22,000. Well, that's not so bad negotiating. Other things, tempted by a reformed VW. TDIs could be finicky, but kind of wondering what the long-term implications might be of one of those. They gave us some income here, which is interesting. Down payment is $7,000. Excellent credit and credit union scores. Income is $45,000 annually. So, I mean, there's a lot to work with here. We should basically be able to fill out a number of forms here, almost for them, to get the car as far as financing. What do you guys think?
So just reading it here, and it looks like he wants something new. So I'm not going to suggest an older hatchback. The one thing when somebody says they want a reliable and a fun hatch, the first thing that pops into my mind is a Mazda 3 hatchback or a Civic hatchback Sport. Obviously, the Civic is a no-go from the back, and he says a lot of great things about the Mazda 3 hatchback. I'm tempted to just tell him to go for the most Mazda 3 hatchback that you can buy. You've negotiated a brand new hatch to $22,000. The new Mazda 3 hatchback is a stellar vehicle. My girlfriend actually just bought a Mazda 3 hatchback manual. She loves it. I can attest to it firsthand as well. It's a beautiful, fun car to drive. And obviously, if you want a manual, you can get it. But that may be a little out of your price range. So if not, the previous gen Mazda 3 hatchback is still a very lovable car. If you want to spend a little bit less on it, try and get a CPO Mazda 3. You can keep a bit of a warranty and be within your budget and have fun. Just find one, probably a touring or a grand touring model will have the power seat that you want.
Joel, what do you think?
I think I'm going to have to agree with Zach that Mazda 3 is probably his best bet for everything he wants. Being affordable, like on the used market, you can get well-equipped ones for pretty cheap, and you can get well-equipped ones with a manual transmission. My parents have a Mazda 3 Touring with a manual transmission and power seats and most everything. Grand Touring has just a little bit more. The fact that he needs power seats really kind of limits things. I think maybe the only other thing I would add is maybe like a really well-equipped GTI, a used one. I don't know how available power stuff was on TDI Volkswagens, because he mentions that. Like, the TDIs are kind of fun, but maybe a GTI would be easier to find with power seats. And
I would kind of agree with that,
yeah. I'm kind of thinking Mazda 3 and GTI are probably the way to go, because most other sort of like sporty hatchbacks are pretty Spartan. I mean, like just manual seats and So I think that's probably the way to go.
I think you definitely need to test drive whatever you go with here, just being mindful that there's kind of a back condition going on. Like, you don't want to buy something and then be like, oh, wow, this really sucks. This hurts. So I would do that. I would basically boil it down to the Mazda 3 hatch, which it sounds like he kind of has that sort of negotiated out, which is good. In some ways, I feel like this is more like just looking for confirmation, affirmation here, in Reddit of all places. But I mean, it might be worth, like your point, Joel, try a GTI, see what's out there, see what's on the used market, and go from there.
Might even, maybe, possibly could find a used Golf R in almost this range.
Ooh, that's interesting.
Like an old enough one you might be able to pull off. GTI is a lot easier, though.
My only caution there is he does say he wants a reliable hatch. Just make sure it's not one that's been beat on its whole life.
Right.
If you do go for an older used Golf R.
Right. And that's why GTI is probably the better bet.
Yeah.
But maybe might find it.
Possibly. You could get lucky.
Small chance.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Check out those three. I think we all are kind of leading Mazda, but we've got a couple other options for you. Thanks for being with me this week, guys. Had a fun show. We spent some money. We talked about some very interesting cars, an array of decadent cars for the most part. Thanks for listening. Please send us your Spend My Monies at podcast@autoblog.com. Please get on to iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating if you enjoy the work we do here. It helps us get the word out. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.